The cabin creaked. Old wood groaned under the weight of the wind, or maybe something else. Emma hugged her knees to her chest, staring into the flickering flames of the fireplace. "It's just the wind," Jason said, but his voice wavered. He didn't believe it. Neither did she. Sophie tossed another log onto the fire, her face pale in the sudden burst of light. "Tell us another ghost story, Ben." Her voice was too high, strained. Ben leaned back, shadows playing across his face. "You sure you want to tempt fate?" Each word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Outside, the wind howled, mimicking the cries of the ghost in Ben's story. A sudden thump from upstairs made them all jump. Emma's breath caught in her throat. What was that? Probably just an animal, Jason said, but he didn't sound convinced. The whispers started then, soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but they grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be coming from the room at the end of the hall upstairs, the room with the boarded-up window. He grabbed a rusty axe from beside the fireplace, its weight reassuring in his hands. The metal was cold and rough, a stark contrast to the warmth of the fire that once roared in the hearth. With each step, he felt the weight of the house's history pressing down on him. He crept towards the stairs, the air thick with anticipation. The whispers intensified as he climbed, each step creaking a warning. The old wooden stairs groaned under his weight, as if protesting his intrusion. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering in the dim light. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling his mind with a cacophony of voices. He reached the door of the room and paused, listening. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in the silence. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening. He could feel the presence of something on the other side, something waiting for him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The whispers were inside, swirling around him like a storm. They seemed to be calling his name, beckoning him closer. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, making it hard to breathe. He felt a chill run down his spine, but he couldn't turn back now. He had to see this through. He pushed open the door, axe raised, ready to defend himself. The hinges creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the empty house. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the faint moonlight filtering through the gaps in the boarded window. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. The room was dark, illuminated only by the faint moonlight filtering through the gaps in the boarded window. Dust motes floated in the air, caught in the pale light. The room was eerily silent, the whispers having ceased the moment he entered. It was as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He saw his reflection in a dusty mirror on the wall, his face pale and drawn. The mirror was old and cracked, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. He could barely make out his own features, but what he saw was enough to send a shiver down his spine. His eyes were wide with fear, his skin ashen. And then, for just a moment, he saw something else standing behind him in the reflection. It was a fleeting glimpse, but it was enough to make his blood run cold. He spun around, axe at the ready, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, save for the shadows that seemed to mock him. Something tall and skeletal, with eyes that burned like hot coals. The image was seared into his mind, a haunting vision that he couldn't shake. He knew then that the stories were true, that the house was indeed haunted, and he was not alone. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, as if urging him to leave. But he couldn't move, paralyzed by fear and the weight of the axe in his hands. Jason stumbled back, a scream rising in his throat. He tripped and fell, the axe clattering away into the darkness. He scrambled to his feet and ran, his heart pounding in his chest. He burst back into the living room, gasping for breath. "We have to get out of here." But as they rushed towards the front door, they found it wouldn't open. It was as if something was holding it shut from the outside. They rattled the handle, kicked at the wood, but it wouldn't budge. They were trapped. Panic seized them. Emma raced to the windows, but they were nailed shut. "We're trapped," she cried, her voice shrill with terror. Sophie grabbed a heavy bookend from the shelf and smashed it against the glass. It shattered, sending shards flying. The cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the sound of the whispers, closer now, and angrier. "This way," Ben shouted, pulling a heavy armchair away from the broken window. One by one they climbed through, cutting themselves on the jagged glass. They didn't stop to think, didn't look back. They just ran. They plunged into the darkness of the woods, their hearts pounding in their chests like war drums. The night was alive with the sounds of their frantic escape, the forest a labyrinth of shadows and unseen dangers. Branches whipped at their faces, leaving stinging welts and drawing blood. Each step was a battle against the forest itself, as if the trees were conspiring to slow them down. Their lungs burned with every breath, the cold night air searing their throats. The whispers followed, an eerie chorus that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Swirling around them like a malevolent wind, the whispers carried a sense of dread that chilled them to the bone. Shadows seemed to reach out from the trees, long and skeletal, with grasping claws that threatened to pull them into the darkness. The skeletal branches loomed overhead, their gnarled fingers scratching at the sky. The air grew heavy, thick with an oppressive weight that made every movement a struggle. Suffocating, the dense fog wrapped around them like a shroud, obscuring their vision and making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The forest floor seemed to buck and heave beneath their feet, as if something was trying to rise from below. They stumbled over roots and rocks, their footing uncertain on the treacherous ground. Each misstep sent them sprawling, but they quickly scrambled to their feet, driven by sheer terror. Their clothes were torn, their faces scratched and bleeding from the relentless assault of the undergrowth, but they didn't dare slow down, not even for a second. The fear of what was behind them was far greater than the pain they felt. Determination etched on their faces, they pushed forward with every ounce of strength they had left. Something was hunting them, something ancient and evil, and it wouldn't stop until it had them. The dark figure moved with an unnatural grace, its eerie eyes glowing in the darkness. It was relentless, a predator that thrived on fear, and it was closing in. The chase was far from over, and the night held many more horrors yet to come. They ran until they were completely lost, their sense of direction gone. The trees pressed in around them, their branches intertwined overhead, blocking out the moon and stars. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. The whispers were everywhere now, surrounding them, taunting them. They seemed to be coming from the trees, from the shadows, from the very air they breathed. They were being herded, driven deeper and deeper into the heart of the woods. Just when they thought they could run no more, they saw a light ahead. It was a beacon in the oppressive darkness, a sign that perhaps, just perhaps, they might find safety and solace. A faint flickering glow in the distance. It wavered like a mirage, almost too good to be true, but it was there, calling to them. Hope surged through them, weak but insistent. It was a fragile thing, easily shattered, but in that moment it was enough to propel them forward. They stumbled towards it, their legs heavy, their lungs screaming for air. Every step was a battle, but the promise of light kept them moving. But as they drew closer, they realized the light wasn't coming from a house or a road. Their hearts sank as the truth dawned on them. It was coming from a single lantern hanging from a gnarled branch. The lantern swayed gently in the breeze, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. And beneath it, etched into the trunk of an ancient oak tree, was a symbol. It was old, weathered, and filled with a sense of foreboding. A spiral, twisting in on itself, like a gateway to some dark and terrible place. It seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, drawing them in. As they stared at it, the lantern flickered once and went out, plunging them back into darkness. The sudden loss of light was like a physical blow, leaving them disoriented and afraid. The whispers seemed to press in closer, filled with a cold, triumphant glee. They were surrounded, the darkness alive with unseen eyes and malevolent intent. The glimmer of hope that had driven them forward was extinguished, leaving only fear and uncertainty in its wake. Trembling, they huddled together, seeking comfort in each other's presence. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees whispering secrets of despair and doom. They knew they had to keep moving, but the path ahead was shrouded in darkness and danger. In the distance, a howl echoed through the trees, sending shivers down their spines. Shadows moved at the edge of their vision, and the forest seemed to come alive with unseen threats. They had no choice but to press on, their hope extinguished, but their will to survive burning brighter than ever. They huddled together, their backs against the base of the oak tree, their eyes wide with terror. They were surrounded, trapped. There was nowhere left to run. The whispers were right in their ears now, cold and insidious, whispering their names, promising oblivion. The shadows swirled around them, thickening, taking on monstrous shapes. And then, with a deafening crack, the ground beneath them gave way. They screamed as they fell, tumbling down, down, down into the darkness. The cabin stood silent in the moonlight, its windows dark and empty. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the shutters. Inside, the fire had burned down to embers, casting flickering shadows on the walls. On the floor lay a single book, its pages fluttering in the breeze from the broken window. It was open to a page with a picture of a spiral, twisting in on itself, like a gateway to some dark and terrible place. The whispers had ceased, but the woods were listening, waiting. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales.